couple things before I get started. I wasted most of my day because I was trying to get a project going with Grand Theft Auto Vice City. The initial idea was that I was going to play the Vice Cry mod and do a pretty much a let's play throughout the whole campaign of the game. And I was thinking, like, a future thought that, I would chronologically play through them because I wasn't starting out with 3, I was starting with Vice City. So I'd play through Vice City, beat the campaign, then play through um, uh, San Andreas, and then play through 3. Well, didn't happen. There's a couple of reasons why. I'll start with the obvious. Well, Vice City modded, not very stable. I was using the Vice Cry mod, along with pairing that with the Reshade mod, along with some personal tweaks that I did myself. Didn't work. So there was that. And then, to make things better, I started with adding some different graphical enhancement mods and, things that would just make the game pop a bit more. It's an older game, so, it's definitely has the room for improvement, especially now seeing how there's so many different mods out for the game and development. It's it's staggering what you can do with those games. It came out, see, Vice City came out in 2002, and you can hook and reshade with that, which it has to use a DirectX 8 converter to 9 to do so. But it's still pretty amazing the fact that you can actually, manipulate the game files and make it look like something truly fantastic. I mean, don't get me wrong, the game's still, it looks like, it looks like a game that came out in 2002. But GTA Vice City always held a special place in my heart because really it was the first GTA game that I had spent such a dedication and time with. I 100%ed that game. And this is back when, 100%ing a game actually fucking meant something. Like, it wasn't just getting collectibles and doing, like, set missions A through B or to Z, whatever. You actually had to strategically find every single activity in that game and make sure you completed everything. That means the ambulance missions, taxi missions, the vigilante missions, everything. Now, Vice City did something really interesting in that it forced you to actually get about 60% completion before you could, I guess, go forward in the game. Yeah, there was a wall per se, because if you didn't actually complete all these activities and to to the degree that they wanted, the final missions would not pop up in the map, which is ingenious. That's fantastic. That means that if you wanted to complete that game, you would have to sit down and actually take the time to finish it. Getting the 100% was just like an extra, bonus. But, it's a lot of people remember the game with a lot of nostalgic reverie. And it's not a perfect game by any means. As time goes on, it becomes more and more apparent that the older generation games, the 3D generation era Grand Theft Auto games, were extremely flawed. The only thing that it really had going for it was the fact that it pushed on those lines where other games really wouldn't. And my daughter's crying, so I'll be right back. Okay, so where was I? That's right. So it was the first time that really the series had tried a lot of new features, much of which features that wouldn't show up in other games in years. One of the more important features that I can think of from the game that really, gave way to a lot of the uh, facets that are incorporated into Rockstar's newer games is the ability to purchase and manage, residences and property. They definitely weren't the first, but the fact that it was such an important part of the whole experience, like I was mentioning earlier, you couldn't get that completion percentage without owning, a certain number of companies. And then you had other games like the one that preceded it, San Andreas, which incorporated RPG-like elements to the gameplay. So not only did you have persistent development of your character, you also had the development of properties, just as in the Vice City game. And you know, to be perfectly honest, three was three was not as good as everybody made it out to be. The only reason I think three got as popular as it did was just by the fact that the third game in the franchise pushed a lot of new content to players. It provided a playground in a capacity that really just wasn't seen yet. But from a technological standpoint, the game was honestly kind of a mess. You had so many bugs and game breaking glitches that, it just. In today's standards for the industry, I don't think half as many would honestly get released. Somebody would have stepped in at some point and said, hey, we can't do this. You go down one flight of stairs and then you trip like 15 feet and you die instantly. And this is going to happen after a player, reaches a certain point in a mission where the like corona that they have to reach is like right in front of them. No, not going to happen. But that was the thing about the pioneer days of the older generation consoles and home game console systems that you kind of got more of a free experience from the developers. And what I mean by free is, I mean, it was an experience where the developers were free from any kind of massive scrutiny over glitches and bugs that, things like that didn't bother them. They would know of these issues, they would know of the bugs, but honestly, they didn't give a fuck. Because why would they care? Games released as is. You didn't get a chance to, do a do-over or release a patch like a couple days later after a game release and say, oops, all these things we needed to fix. No. The state at which a game was released was the release state of the game. Which I kind of miss that. Because it meant a couple things to the consumer. It meant that the product that you were playing, if the product was of good quality, the developers cared about it so much that, whatever they deemed to be acceptable bugs, glitches, those were in the game because they deemed it acceptable to be there. Or glitches that they weren't aware of, they had enough confidence to know that nothing could pop up that would honestly break the game after it released. Do we get that anymore from the game industry at all? I mean, think about it. You have so many different titles coming out every year, and they release a handful of updates throughout the after the release. What measurement for quality is there anymore? I mean, yeah, I mean, they can continue working on the game after it released and, fix issues, problems. Updates aren't, necessarily new to PC games. In fact, they're pretty common. However, for home console games, this is still a very new concept. I'm kind of just left with the thought that, maybe things haven't really been going in such a great direction. Don't get me wrong, though. A lot of the material in games that come out every single year are fantastic. You have titles that really push the boundary, the edge. But would you find any of the games that have come out during that time or during this time, have you found any of them that made you say, this game was worked with 100% dedication, and there is absolutely no reason past the release of the game that it should ever see an update? If you can do that and you can, comfortably state that, the games themselves are fine, then yeah, of course, I'll concede my point. But if you've ever played a game and you've ran into a glitch or a bug and you think to yourself, oh, they'll fix that, you might be more of the problem than what you're honestly admitting. Because in order for these standards to really continue to be the standard, the customer has to be okay with it. So are we okay with it? That's the question that we really need to ask ourselves. Are we okay with the fact that games come out half-assed, half-complete, and we expect a patch, we expect a fix? Why the hell are we expecting fixes? Should that ever be on anybody's mind when they buy a product that's supposedly finished? You spend, what, $40, $60 on a new game. Do you say to yourself when you're checking out with that $40, $60 game, hey, when I get home, the number one thing I expect to do is have to sit through some patches because certain fixes and glitches, bugs weren't initially patched before the game came out because their publisher was rushing them to release. If your expectation of buying a product and taking it home to have to wait even longer to actually use a product, if that's the norm, then obviously there's trouble. And I know that a lot of people, feel that way, that, the second they bring a game home, that, hey, I have to do this and that before I can actually play. Something can be said for the size of games and the way that the format is leaning. I'm not talking about having to install a game to wait to play it. Installation, that's expected. It's even for console games now. The initial file size for the games themselves is so huge. It'd be stupid to not recognize that, it's the games are actually going to need some preparation. Now, the thing that I'm pissed off about that I see is that, you buy a game, you install it, and then first thing, there's a 2, 4, 6 gigabyte update for such and such. Why? Was the purchase I made not enough time for them to, fucking release a game that's not bullshit? I digress, though. I could continue on this point for quite a while. It really wouldn't make much of a difference either way. Because people are going to do what they're going to do. They're going to go out and they're going to spend their money, $60 at a time for a video game that, it's the same rehashed, recycled fucking materials as last time. And they're going to continue spending their fucking money. Because you know why? Because they like it. And that's not horrible. It's not a sin to fucking like something. You can like something all fucking day long. I don't give a shit. But the thing is, if you like something and you stand for something and you're going to defend something, you better build up your fucking defense about that one thing. Because you can't sit there and tell me that, it's your decision to fucking spend the X amount of dollars on fucking games that are barely even fucking finished coming out of the goddamn developer's hands that it's justified. There's just no fucking way. If I wanted to do that, you know, I would buy a plethora of fucking contemporary modern titles. It is what it is. I tend to, you know, have my own views on this matter because, you know, honestly, I grew up in a very transitional time for the video game industry. First console I ever had was a Nintendo, Famicom Nintendo. First games I ever played were Mike Tyson's Punch Out, Super Mario Brothers 1, 2, and 3. I went from that to a Sega Genesis. Love Sega Genesis. Fantastic fucking system. And then, after the Genesis, I went immediately to a PlayStation. And the PS1 had a fantastic library of games. But a lot of the games that came out on the PS1 were mostly of the similar genres. You know, you had your JRPGs, of course, which, I mean, there's so many. And then, of course, you had different titles, like the Tony Hawk Pro Skater games that, you know, started actual, like, subgenres of gaming. And then, you know, you had games like, let's see here. Like Grand Theft Auto, for instance. The very first, the top-down, originally known as actually Race and Chase, in which the developers decided to eventually shelve that name and go with something a little more palatable, reflective of the actual nature of the game. You see, Grand Theft Auto actually, when it was first being developed, was actually being developed as a race and chase game, where, you know, you'd either play the person. Well, I believe that you played primarily the person running from the cops, and they had this whole city like lined up, planned out, where you would drive around, running from the cops, going from point A to point B, fulfilling objectives. But then they found out that the game just really wasn't any fun. Like, of course, to a certain extent, it was entertaining, but really, it didn't do anything new. per se. And it was at that point that they finally decided that, you know, Grand Theft Auto was going to be the title they were going to release. And the title itself was going to be based around just completing some missions that you were given with certain objectives, and when the game released, it was a phenomena. Widely regarded as, you know, one of the most innovative games at the time. Then you had the second game. Grand Theft Auto 2 did not do as hot as the first one. And that's not to say, you know, that the second game didn't innovate enough. The problem was it was just too much more of the same. And it's what generally led to the team deciding, well, you know, the top-down just isn't really working anymore. It actually, you know, influenced them to decide that they need to start working on a 3D version of the title that would utilize, you know, graphic space and whatnot. They did this by utilizing certain lessons that developers learned from a game on the Nintendo 64. And I cannot remember the title of it. Let me look real quick. It's pretty iconic. Let's see here. Body Harvest. That was the name of it, yeah. So, Body Harvest was this game where you play like this commando and you're defending Earth on an onslaught of alien invaders. And the missions featured open environments where you would roam from point A to point B using whatever resources you had available to you. It was pretty much the baby steps to which we finally got Grand Theft Auto 3. But you know, that's like I was saying, that was the developer environment back then. I found it so much more exciting. I don't really find a lot of the technological feats that game developers have made recently to be all that impressive. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. What it is they're just finding better ways to do the things that they're already doing. Which, that's not bad. It's just, you don't have the same frontier of newness that games had at one time, you know, where, you know, one company, one producer was doing something truly unique that nobody else was even trying at the time. You know, that is the pinnacle, I believe, of game development. And whether or not we actually see more of that, it's yet to be seen. It's hard to say. We could enter another renaissance of game development, and you know that could be the focus. Is, you know, developers actually doing something out of their comfort zone. And as I said, you know, it's not horrible that, you know, they're sticking with what they know. I keep finding myself just thinking that I'd like to see something new. Something I have not seen before. And maybe that's greedy. Maybe, you know, I shouldn't be thinking that, you know, what we've gotten over the past couple decades hasn't been enough. But it's not nearly as unique as it once felt to be. I know it seems like I'm going in circles, but really I've just been kind of half-assing the search here. I know there are some things that I need to activate, per se. I've just been allowing doing the battles and whatnot. God damn it. So it's kind of funny. We were discussing on an earlier playthrough. I was kind of weird that you know, we didn't really get any reload function, and well, you know, maybe if I played the character that had the 1-star difficulty rather than starting with the 2 to 3 star, I'd probably know this stuff. I don't know why I didn't play this character first. She's pretty badass. I mean, first response to fucking goblins intimidating the village. Let's fucking burn them to the ground. Pretty cool. Well, let's see here. We have this door. That's the way back out. Okay. Alright. So, that got me through here. So there's got to be some lever or something I'm not pulling. Oh, so the white exclamation points when they come up, I can avoid those. The red ones, I can't. Which I think is a fantastic feature, by the way. I would think that there would be like a lamp or something that I have to light. But I guess not. Okay, so I want to look for switches. See, I fucking, I did that and nothing happened. Oh well. It's all good now. Uh-oh. Well, that was fun. So I'm gonna call it here. Pretty much as tradition, about an hour for each episode. I don't really want to drag it out any longer than that. So, well, thanks for joining, and I know I'm a riveting conversationalist, but still appreciate it. Take it easy.